Hi everyone, my name is Andra Stanoiu and you're listening to the Healthy Debate Show here on UK Health Radio and podcast. In one of our previous episodes, we were discussing neurodiversity in children and informed you that according to ADHD Aware organization, up to 50% of the population are thought to be neurodiverse. We addressed then the challenges that children with mental health illness face in schools and the community. Today, we are starting the conversation about neurodiversity from a parenting and social perspective with our specialist, Jan Stewart, a highly regarded mental health governance expert and advocate. She's the author of Hold On Tight, A Parent Journey, Raising Children with Mental Illness. And she's now openly come for the second time for the Healthy Debate Show to discuss her parenting experience, but also to provide very valuable educational advice and explain to us how can things change from her perspective, what are the steps that we need to take as communities and as society to improve the life of these children and parents. Hi, Jan, welcome to the Healthy Debate Show. How are you today?
Thanks, Andra. It's wonderful to be back.
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved your energy in the previous show. And even though the topic was very serious, you managed to make it very informational, but also, educational and very, very approachable. So thank you so much for, taking, again, 50 minutes of your time to continue the conversation, because last time I had so many questions left and we're finally going to address them today.
Wonderful.
So, Jen, for those listeners that haven't been listening to the initial episode we had last month, please just introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about your work, your passion for advocacy and your book, your interest in this topic, in addressing neurodiversity and talking about it.
Absolutely, be happy to. And as I said, I'm delighted to be back. This has been almost a lifelong journey. Both my husband David and I grew up in families that were warm and loving and really had never known true adversity before. And then we had children. Life was rosy. Then our lives became a nonstop emotional roller coaster journey with not one, but two children with multiple complex mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders. It came as quite a shock to us and has really turned our lives upside down. I say that words like autism, Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, ADHD, anxiety, learning disabilities, I had never really known what they were or used them in my vocabulary before. As I describe in the book, the kids are grown now, but from almost the time they were born, my gut said, and my husband's gut, something's different, something's not right. And there were many neurodevelopmental markers that we looked back on. But doctor, and this is unfortunately very common, kept discounting my concerns. The children both learned to read and write on time, were outgoing and chatty. And he said, they're just under a bit of stress. Don't worry about it. Calm down. And I should have trusted my gut. So since that very beginning, we had growing concerns with impulsivity, distractibility, anxiety, tics, learning disabilities. Andrew, our son, who's the older one, couldn't maintain eye contact, had a lot of difficulty with change and abstract thinking, and underwent terrible 2-hour screaming. We call them rages. I know the community doesn't like that word, but it's emotional overload. And nonstop compulsive rituals. And Ainsley was out of control. Where Andrew was rule-bound, she was out of control. And at school, she was constantly being sent to the principal's office for being disruptive. Couldn't read her friends' social cues, paralyzing anxiety. And so it's been quite a journey to find the right psychiatrists and psychologists to navigate the healthcare system, to find schools who would truly partner with us. And as the children became adults, to find workplaces that are inclusive and accommodating. And it really has been complicated at every stage with co-occurring conditions, with decades-long wait lists for supportive housing. We've had to recalibrate relationships with friends and family, some of them. And we've had to really learn to not only accept, but embrace the fact that life would not be as planned for or hoped for in many ways in order to move forward. But once I retired from my wonderful job on Bay Street, which is Canada's equivalent of Wall Street, I said to myself, it's time to pay it forward. The children's stories had propelled me years ago into mental health and neurodiversity advocacy. And as you know, Andra, I chair Carey's Place Autism Services, the largest autism services provider in this country. I'm a consultant to the Tourette Association of America Education Advisory Board, and I've recently started writing a monthly column on autism for Today's Parent. I so remember being in the shoes of other young, struggling parents, frightened and frozen and not knowing what to do. And that's why I wrote Hold On Tight. It's really not only to tell the reality and the toll, and I am brutally honest, but to gift readers with key insights to help ease their journey. And that really is the background. And I am thrilled that the book has recently won the Mom's Choice Award and is doing exceptionally well.
Thank you so much, Jen, for this very, very, in-depth introduction to your life and to your advocacy to some extent, isn't it? But of course, more on this to come, because I'm very interested in finding out more details about your book and some specific things that you've written in there that do require our attention, because they're real experiences, and the way you wrote them, they're very easy to understand, very approachable, and very informative. So I know you're not a medical expert, and I don't want you to give me a scientific definition of this, but in your own words, as a person who has been on this journey for tens of years, isn't it? What does it mean to be neurodiverse?
Oh, it's a great question, and I love to address this one. I think everyone should start from the basis that neurodiversity means that individuals' brains function differently. But let's remember that every individual, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical without these issues, have unique strengths, capabilities, and talents. And differences in brain functioning do not mean deficits. There's lots of strengths, and that's what we want to celebrate. My son, who's autistic, Andrew, always says proudly, I am Andrew. I am not defined by my autism.
That is so powerful, isn't it?
I think so.
And this takes me to my next question about empowering children, because hearing Andrew saying that, I am sure that a big portion of this is your contribution and your husband's David's contribution. So how do we support our children to be empowered as a neurodiverse child?
Yeah, it's another excellent question, Andra. So many of us parents naturally shelter and protect our children, especially when they're vulnerable and face challenges. I know I've done it many times. But our goal as parents is to help our children develop into responsible adults, just like every other parent. And we need to transition from being family CEO to being coach as much as possible. For instance, when your children are first diagnosed, and if they're put on medications, it upsets me when I hear parents, and I understand this, but they try to hide the name medication and call them special vitamins. They don't want their children to feel different. They don't want them to be singled out, and they want them to take their medications, and they're concerned they won't. But I don't think this helps anyone. If you educate your child, you empower them so they can increasingly, as they grow older, become involved in their own advocacy and treatment. And that's what we should all want. So as your children grow older, and you increasingly do this, you must remember to stay connected with them. Keep communication open. Research consistently shows that older adolescents and young adults need parental guidance, particularly to develop self-regulation. Of course, what we have to watch the tendency of, and again, I'm guilty of this, is to be over-involved or micromanage. Again, parenting 101, but magnified. So set expectations according to what you think your child can handle or even might be able to handle. You're going to make mistakes and you have to test them. But when we make those mistakes, we have to stop fixing or trying to rescue them. I know it's very scary, but that's the way our children are going to learn to manage obstacles and to face life with more confidence. Of course, the other side of that coin is don't give up on consequences and be very clear about them. If your child, for instance, is able to drive, my daughter Ainsley is, my son Andrew does not. If she gets a ticket, she has to pay for it. And if she doesn't, she loses driving privileges, even if that's the only way for her to get to where she's going, whether it's work or school. That's what helps your children become more independent and responsible. And of course, we have to continue to remember to have fun together. So help your child set goals. Involve them more and more in decisions that affect them. So get their input, give them choices, particularly when it comes to problem solving, when something goes wrong. And above all, I try to remember to accept and respect the fact that it's their life, not mine. I won't always agree with their life decisions, but that's how I empower them.
Jen, a couple of things that really stood up for me, and I really want more details on this because I'm very curious. One is in regards to medication. I think I've shared this with you in the previous episode and privately. I've worked many years ago as a special needs teacher. So in my experience, I had many conversations with parents that were very concerned about medication. We're very concerned about, the amount of medications. They were concerned about how the child will take this. And you mentioned vitamins there, isn't it? So if I understood correctly, your example was that some parents are saying, telling their children you're taking vitamins rather than, the specific medications. Have I understood correctly?
Correct.
Yeah. So what's your view on this? Because psychiatric medication can be quite a controversial topic anyway. But when we're putting children in the middle of it, it becomes even more of intense conversation. So what is your view on that? And of course, you shared briefly, the idea around, being transparent with your child. But what would be some thoughts and maybe advice to parents who are struggling with this dilemma?
Yes, I certainly understand fully the controversy. And I wish there was a right or wrong answer. I can only speak from my point of view and to tell you that medications, by the way, paired with therapy, but medications have been critical for both Andrew and Ainsley to change their brain chemistry, which then allows therapy to start and optimize their functioning. Andrew would frankly be institutionalized without them, and Ainsley would be still totally out of control. Now, look, I understand that parents are wary, and you've got to weigh the side effects and interactions. Let me give you a few examples. When Andrew was 9, and he exploded into these terrifying daily 2-hour frightening rages, they lasted every day for effectively 9 months. You can imagine how drained and exhausted I was and how much in distress he was. And after 9 months, I found a new developmental pediatrician who prescribed a powerful antipsychotic medication for him. And I kid you not, Andrew, within 2 days, the rages had stopped. I mean, they were done, no more. We were so relieved, but there were concerning side effects with this medication. Andrew started gaining 3 pounds a week, and I mean every week. And fortunately, in our case, it stopped after 6 weeks. We know other children who have gained close to 100 pounds on it. But this medication has been a lifesaver for Andrew. And when you weigh, what would you rather have? It's clear to us. Ainsley has tried a number of different stimulants, antidepressants, and medications, some of which have been highly effective. some of which haven't, and some of which have caused her to have nausea, stomach upset, shakes, can't sleep, loss of appetite, gain appetite, it all changes. So lots and lots of trial and error and mistakes along the way. But for us, the benefits have far outweighed the risks. And I always say to other folks, gee, if you had a child with epilepsy, diabetes, if you had a partner with a heart issue, would you give them medications if needed? The brain is just another part of the body. So I embrace medications if needed.
In terms of disclosing information to school, about medication, and not just medication, about the health and mental health issues. How did you go about that? In our previous episode, if I recall correctly, we discussed about stigma, stigma around the community, stigmas in schools. Should a parent disclose their child issues and medications to their schools? And if yes, how important is this? And, can it make a difference to the child's development and safety?
Yes, very, very important topic. And again, not straightforward. Some parents are comfortable disclosing, some aren't. And by the way, this only, as you said, it's health issues beyond medications, but it also is later at work. There's actually a 2019 Ipsos survey of working age adults in which I was shocked to hear 75% said they were reluctant or wouldn't disclose a mental illness to their employer due to stigma, not wanting to be treated differently, fear of consequences, or losing their job. So I do understand parents' fears of their child being labeled, seen as less talented, different, or inferior. But of course, the other side of the coin is, if you're transparent, that's the way you can get support and the accommodations your child might need. That's also a great way to find acceptance. There can be bullying either way, but if peers understand, it's often helpful. Of course, this means that your child needs to be at the right school, a school that sets the tone with zero tolerance for bullying and a true belief in inclusion. And I love that word partnership that we talked about before, but partnership with the family. So the guideline that I generally follow and recommend is if your child's issues are meaningfully interfering in their daily functioning at school and you think they need accommodations, disclose.
It's very interesting that you mentioned, the peers to understand and the school to be, to have zero tolerance on bullying. And is it hard to find a school that will be able to accommodate this?
Increasingly, there's great news, not because there's much more awareness about diversity and mental health. Now, that said, what it takes is one of the key insights, and hold on tight, and that is embrace research. Research, research, research. And part of research is not only reading everything you can about schools and reaching out to different schools, but I have always found the most powerful referrals and trusted names are those I get from other parents of similar children. They've been there, they know what they're talking about, and once I begin to hear the same names over and over again, that's my starting point. Of course, I then think it's very important for the parents to go meet with the principal. And again, if you're comfortable disclosing, disclose, and you'll get a sense, and set up plans for partnership. I wouldn't have kept either child at a school that didn't partner. So that Ainsley School held monthly group meetings with her principal, all her teachers, her psychologist from outside, her external psychologist, and us. And we always talked about what was going on, what was working well, what wasn't, so we could make integrated changes that affected not only school, but home and with peers. And Andra's school sent notes home every night, and we returned them the following morning so that we were in constant communication. I talked about that powerful antipsychotic that he started that stopped his rages in their tracks. Well, when he initially took the first dose, it was a little too much, and he fell asleep in class for 2 hours. But the school was not alarmed or concerned in the least because I had written them. I had actually called them. And they knew he was starting this new medication and his body was simply adjusting. So there are all kinds of benefits, and in my mind, it's pretty clear.
Jen, it sounds very much that you did have support throughout the time. You found support in schools. Am I correct to say that you felt supported?
Yes, I mean, both children started in the public school system, and they tried their best, but they weren't set up to help them. And so we had to go and look for alternatives. And that's where I did that research and found 2 different schools that were appropriate for each child. Andrew's school, right through grade 8, had 4 children in a class, very structured and caring. Ainsley's school was a little larger. They had both a regular stream and they call it small classes. It's a special ed stream. And again, structured and caring. And those schools work for them. And when it came time for high school, we equally found it happened to be a boarding school that the kids went to because there was nothing in our area at the time. Great news that there are many more options today. But again, this was a school, this was Eagle Hill School in Massachusetts. It's an independent boarding and day school for children with both ADHD and learning disabilities, multimodal instruction, again, small and structured, lots of communication. And it's that research again and reaching out to other parents that gave me the confidence to proceed.
Did you have any emotional challenges when you had to decide to remove them from mainstream and move them to a different school?
No, it was such a relief.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We parents know when the situation isn't working, whether it's school, camp, with friends, wherever. And we were desperate for answers. So once we found an environment where we all felt they could succeed and thrive, it was a huge relief, not only to my husband David and me, but to the children themselves. They had been struggling and were in distress, and they were so happy to be in the right environment.
Well, that was a very, very positive thought, to be fair, because, again, going back to my experiences, I've had quite a few conversations with parents who are struggling to accept that this is the path. That is for the child's safety. This decision is made for the child's safety because, I don't know, probably you're based in Canada, isn't it?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so in Canada, probably things are, slightly different. I'm sure the system is different. My experiences were in a country where, there were lots of struggles and challenges in the society and in the community trying to make people understand, that we should make an effort to integrate, children with mental health illness and still open our schools with these classes, have special classes, dedicate special teaching staff. So I do remember how challenging it was for some of the parents is I had conversations with to actually decide that, going for an alternative school might be the right decision for their child. So it was almost, an internal fight. So I'm very pleased to hear that your experience was much positive.
Yes, and I think maybe our children's symptomology and behavior was severe. And so it was very clear in my case. There are many, many parents who have children who have less severe symptomology, and it might be more straightforward ADHD or anxiety. I don't minimize those at all. And I'm the first one that can say if you can integrate your child, gee, go for it. That's wonderful. But for parents of children like mine, there really isn't a choice. And if you don't accept it, you're just going to go, I think, deeper and deeper into the hole.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a huge strain on the parent, isn't it? Emotionally, financially, mentally. And if you're not there 100% to support your child, you're not helping. You're not helping in any way. And if the whole situation is becoming very heavy to manage, then a decision needs to be made. So yes, I guess you are right. It also depends on, what's the mental health issue, what's the level of, intensity or maybe frequency of these events that tend to be quite not necessarily upsetting. I'm just trying to find the right word, but very, very draining for both parties, isn't it? For parents and children, likewise. Jan, let's take a short commercial break, and then once we're back, I would like us to discuss about siblings and about your book and some of the beliefs that you challenge in your book. So we'll be back with Jan Stewart discussing neurodiversity and integration.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And we're back with Jan. We're discussing neurodiversity and parenting and community support, isn't it? So, Jan, tell me, how does a parent support a neurotypical sibling when they have a neurodivergent child who demands much attention and care? And I'm going to explain to you why I'm asking this. Again, going back to my previous experiences, I remember there was a situation where I had a child in my classroom that had a very severe autism and ADHD, and the mom was really, really struggling. And she also had a younger daughter. So the younger daughter became so wise and so cautious around her sister. And it was very challenging to watch her being around her sister, because she became almost as a second parent for her, even though the difference, it was quite large, about 6 or 7 years. So she was about 7 or 8 and her sister was 14, 15. So this is where, I need your help in understanding how can a parent marry these two situations happily.
Yes, this is very important. And if you would forgive me, I just want to make one additional point. Before the break, we were talking about education. And I do want to point out to parents who financially feel, I can't afford private schools or some of the alternatives. You can. All of these schools have scholarships. And again, it just takes perseverance. So I just wanted to make that point.
That's a very good point, yeah, because when you said boarding school, isn't it, independent school, my mind immediately went to the cost, and I'm not going to lie to you. We live in the UK and the costs are tremendously high. Of course, I don't know details, I don't know the specifics, but it's good to know that scholarship is a possibility.
Absolutely, and they're the same here, very high. Let's talk about siblings, one of my favorite topics. It is so easy for parents to unintentionally, and I stress that word, relegate siblings who have no issues or fewer issues. Ainsley has fewer issues than Andrew, to relegate them to the background. I have done it, so I know. I think about a story that upsets me to this day. I came home from work one afternoon to find Ainsley shivering with fear in her closet, hiding there because her brother was having one of those frightening screaming rages. And, it really woke David and me up. So we immediately started doing 4 things. The first thing we did was to spend whatever precious little time we had. And believe me, it was precious little with 2 kids like this. But in activities that she enjoyed. The key is it has to be in activities that the sibling really enjoys. In Ainsley's case, it was playing soccer, hockey, baking together. She loved board games like Candyland or Hamburger. The second thing we did was we found an urban farm program that was downtown Toronto for siblings in trauma. And it was fantastic. It gave her desperately needed respite away from all of us at home and the challenges here. but it also started her on a lifelong love of animals. So there was a real positive to it as well. Sibling support groups, extremely helpful. There are peer support groups, parent support groups. There are many sibling support groups as well. And probably the most important thing we did, Andra, was to sit down with her again and explain in age-appropriate language much more detail about what was going on with her brother, so that we demystified it and it became less frightening.
Jen, listening to you, it's so inspirational. It was the first time and it is now. And the reason why I'm saying this is because everything that you just presented now in terms of the steps you have taken, the changes you have implemented in your family and your family dynamics, these are really, extraordinary decisions that yourself and your husband made at that time, very suitable for the situation, for the context. So my question to you is, how did you get to this point? Not everyone is... Because was it you doing your own research? Is it you asking around? Is it you with your intuition and your general knowledge about the world and, family? Was it intuition? Because these are, great steps that you've taken.
Thank you, but no, not intuition. I didn't know anything about this world when I started. I always find it amazing, even on the day-to-day basis, you need a new dishwasher. You don't know anything about it, research, and you find out. Well, it's the same here. It's systematic research to start with. It took me a long time to realize, and in my mind, far too long, to realize that the pediatrician who kept discounting my concerns and telling me to calm down was not right. And that's when I became an advocate and said, I've got to trust my gut. And that's the first insight in my book. Trust your gut as a parent. You know your children best. And if you think something is wrong, it generally is. So that's the starting point. And once you start digging into that research, and as I said, that research is multi-pronged. It's everything from reading everything you can, videos, finding support groups. I made 10 to 20 calls, I think I mentioned this last time, to hospitals and psychiatrists nearby just to find who I thought would be right for the children. And it turned out initially to be the same psychiatrist, and still is, although it's a different psychiatrist today. But their psychologists are different. The same thing with the schools. It's that research again, going back. Those support groups, the first support group we went to for children with ADHD was wonderful and eye-opening. There was no support group for parents in Toronto of children with OCD. So with Andra's psychiatrist, she and I started it. And again, you find a whole community. And in my case, that's what's given me hope and propelled me forward, probably more than anything else, as well as seeing my children succeed. They're the heroes of the story. And it's their stories. Once I had the energy and the reserves, and believe me, I didn't when the children were in their deepest, darkest moments. And many parents, when you're in crisis, forget about it. But as you climb out of it, think about starting to pay it forward and helping others who have been in your position. And so I know I'm wired that way, but everyone in my family, kids included, have a core belief in helping others. And that's what's set me on the journey in both advocacy and in writing Hold On Tight.
I remember you mentioned in the last episode that both of your children are now working, isn't it?
Right.
So what do inclusive employers do to maximize the success of neurodiverse employees from your perspective? Or maybe what did you notice in the employers of your children?
Yes, well, again, this took some time to learn. Let me give Andrew as an example. So there's been quite a contrast between Andrew's previous employers and his current employer. So on his first employer, and by the way, he became a cashier at a major retailer here in Toronto, and the way he did it was just by contacting them. He has no filter from his autism, and he reached out and said, I'd like to be a cashier, and they hired him. It was wonderful. and he excelled there. In fact, I can't remember if I told this story, and forgive me if I did last time, but about 3-4 months after he started, I snuck in to see how he was doing. And there were 3 or 4 customers on his line, and 3 other cashiers sat empty. Management tried to redirect them, but not one customer would move. And that's because Andrew knew them personally, had learned their children's names, engaged them, and made each of their days happier. Well, that went on really well for about 5 years. And then new management came in. And they didn't want an obviously disabled-looking employee on the front line interacting with customers. Andrew has a major speech impediment, can't maintain eye contact. Sometimes he drools, so it goes. So they tried to shove him in the back, stocking shelves. You can imagine how irate I was, and moved quickly to remedy that one. So I learned a little there. Now, his second employer, and he also got this on his own by reaching out, was a major organization that wanted to do the right thing. He was their first autistic employee. But they were so bureaucratic, they couldn't work in partnership. There's that key word again, Andra, partnership, with Andrew and with me. And they treated him like a child. I know it was unintentional. But they gave him 1 hour of pretty boring work in the morning and then said as a reward, "You can go watch TV." Well, that's not meaningful or productive, and he certainly didn't feel good about himself. So after several years then, again to his credit with that lack of filter, he contacted the new chief executive officer at one of Canada's leading telecommunications companies, Rogers Communications, and said, "I've always liked Rogers. I'd like to work at your company." And 3 months later, they hired him. But by now, I had learned how to advocate for him. And the lessons I learned are really important in terms of what inclusive employers can do. The key word, again, is partnership. Andrew's been there 4.5 years. The first thing we did was the day before he started, or days before he started, we held an in-service education session with the Rogers, with his managers, human resources, and their well-being department. We explained his profile, his strengths, and discussed each of his disorders so they understood what they were, demystifying them again. In his case, in the workplace, it's mostly impulsivity and anxiety. And we talked about what they could do to maximize his success. And ever since that day, they've listened to our recommendations. They've followed our advice. They brought in a job coach for both Rogers and Andrew, who not only has helped integrate Andrew into Rogers, but to this day meets monthly with both Rogers and Andrew. They've customized accommodations for Andrew. He has a lot of difficulty with transitions and changes between activities, so his work hours are the same every day, while the rest of his team members work on shift. And they share their thinking with me. At his 4-year anniversary, they called me and said, "Why don't we look at a new job for Andrew, some career advancement?" And I said, "Please don't do that. His anxiety will go through the roof. But what he loves his job, what you can do is look at career enhancement." And to their credit, they've followed this, and they had a mentor sit with him during a 3-day online course to deepen his skills. And after a day and a half, it was clear that the course material was way too difficult for him. And they gave him such kudos for trying. It's absolutely heartwarming. So my best practice tips are: 1, treat every employee with dignity and respect. Treat them as a full member of the team. Give them the same work. Let them know they're valued. 2, commit to an inclusive culture from the top down. The CEO sets the tone, and every organization needs to have an environment in which employees feel supported. 3, partner, as I said, with your neurodivergent employees. And 4, let them take the lead and tell you what they need. They know if they can't advocate for themselves, as Andrew sometimes can't, bring in an advocate. There are all kinds of ways to do it. You can ask questions as long as they're not overly intrusive, And I always say, please don't offer unasked for advice. You're not their therapist, lawyer, or doctor. This happens an awful lot. It's really hard to believe. Right.
It is, because people want to help, isn't it? So sometimes.
But they don't know. And finally, I would say, educate your team. There's neurodiversity awareness training. There are employee resource groups. There are all kinds of things that really give every employee a sense of belonging and empower them. But above all, don't take a one-size-fits-all approach. Remember that every neurodivergent employee is different, as we said at the beginning, with their own unique strengths and capabilities. And let me repeat, differences are not deficits.
This is an excellent message, Jen, for employers. And I think that the idea that I'm taking forward with me is the partnership idea, and the fact that they've integrated you. They didn't make decisions based on what they thought it was the right thing. They've asked, they listened. And this says a lot about their main purpose, which was actually to support Andrew. Was not to, tick another box on diversity, because now there's so many accreditations, there's so many, it looks good for employers, whereas Andrew's employers were genuinely interested in supporting him, and this did come across. I've specifically made a note of the career enhancement advice that you've given them, which was very intelligent and very brave to say as a parent, you know what, I know my child, that's not going to work, so why don't we do something else? So the creativity around that was amazing. So Jen, let's take a short commercial break, and then we'll be back to kind of prepare to close today's episode, because again, we had so much to cover, and that was excellent. So we'll be back with Jen in a couple of minutes.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And we're back with Jen Stewart. We're discussing neurodiversity. Jen, I know you're a very determined lady, and you're a very determined advocate for mental health and for neurodiversity. And you do come across as someone that is very straightforward and very clear in their message and very, accurate. And I know you've challenged quite a few beliefs in your book. So what were the main perspectives or beliefs that you wanted the world to challenge through your book?
Yeah, I think there are 13 key insights in Hold On Tight, but I challenge a number of beliefs in them. And let me give you 3 examples, Andra.
Please.
One is that I counsel parents just what we said, to trust their guts and not back off if their doctor says otherwise. You know your child best. Of course, you have to listen to them, but if what they say doesn't resonate with you, keep looking. You deserve it. Number 2, that open communication is so key. And it's such a cliche to say talk openly with your child. But as I said, don't hide or avoid information with them. Help them be your partner on the journey so that you can increasingly empower them and educate them. That open communication also goes with the sibling, as we've discussed. It's just critical. And 3, I tell parents to recalibrate the expectations they have of their friends, certain family members, and their own lives. Even though you may be in crisis and terrified, you won't always get the support you need. And we know it's from a lack of education, a lack of awareness, with fear, misunderstandings, and stigma. And sometimes there's even a lack of interest. So as difficult as it is, shed friends who are not there for you. I've had it happen. They've distanced themselves, and it's very upsetting. But I didn't have the energy or emotional reserves to even devote to my friendships. The silver lining is those other parents of neurodivergent children who really have bolstered me through the years. I've had to learn to navigate and limit engagement with certain family members, particularly those who are critical, judgmental, or to me the worst, think they know all the answers. My mother, who really I thought understood everything, when Andrew was on that medication where he was gaining 3 pounds a week, she actually turned to me and said one afternoon, "Well, you don't want a fat child." I was actually shocked. But we learn that there are communities of love and support out there. And my mother quickly became one. She was horrified a few months later at what she had said and realized it. And that's who you need to turn to have that hope and know there's help and you're not alone.
Jen, thank you so much for your time today. I would like our listeners to get in touch with you, of course, through your book mainly, isn't it? So where can we find your book? So we can read it and get a deeper insight into your experience and your expertise.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Andra. It's actually not only my book. I have a quarterly newsletter that your listeners can all find through my website at Jan Stewart Author, and that newsletter always has more insights and tips and more information. On Instagram, particularly, and Facebook, I post about neurodiversity every day at Jan Stewart Author. And Hold On Tight is widely available on Amazon, Indigo in Canada, Caversham Booksellers, Barnes & Noble. You can ask your bookstore to bring it in. As I said, I'm thrilled it's won the Mom's Choice Award and has been doing exceptionally well. And if it resonates with you, please contact me and write a review on Amazon. I would love it. And most of all, remember to persevere, have hope, and hold on tight.
Jen, thank you so much for your time today. As always, inspirational, clear message, very positive. Again, thank you for your time and dedication to this cause.
Delighted to be here.
Until next time, may we hear only good things.